start our second session of the day, Seeing the Light at the End of the Tunnel using MPLP to provide access to sound archives collections. This is presented by Patty Falk. Patty Falk is the music catalog / music librarian at Bowling Green State University. She has worked at BGSU for the past 28 years as a special collections cataloger in popular culture and music, and now works solely in the music library and Bill Schurk Sound Archives. She has cataloged in multiple formats and co-authored a book on cataloging special collections materials, particularly unusual items such as fanzines, story papers, nickel weeklies, and various music formats. She has served on various cataloging committees in MLA and is currently serving as leader of the Cataloging Interest Group for the Midwest chapter of MLA. So please welcome Patty.
Everybody can hear me? Okay, I'll try to keep talking into it. Hope I don't lose my voice. It's been a little in and out today. So my topic is seeing the light at the end of the tunnel using MPLP, more product, less process, to provide access to a sound archives collection. So for me, this was really actually a celebration of a 10-year project, which you'll see in a few minutes. For those of us in archives and have a lot of big backlogs everywhere, it's truly amazing that I didn't think I'd actually finish this in my lifetime and working at Bowling Green. And I've been there 28 years, so something you can look forward to, and hopefully everyone else can have a chance to complete something at their institution. It is possible, just so you know. So just reading the abstract real quick. The Music Library and Bill Schurk Sound Archives at Bowling Green State University is known for its large collection of popular music sound recordings and has a history of gaining grants to catalog these recordings. I actually started there as a grant cataloger in NEH back in 1995. And the latest grant that we got was used to catalog 45 RPM discs using the MPLP process. But there's been a 10-year project that we were using this similar process to provide access to the 100,000 plus popular sound recordings that have yet to be fully cataloged. So we had to find a way to get this project done. So since 2013, our student staff have been searching for duplicate recordings and using Excel spreadsheets to provide basic information to make the collection minimally accessible for our patrons. And this presentation, I'll describe the process that we used to finally complete this project using Excel spreadsheets, MarcEdit, and streamlining the search and shelving process. Now again, this is 2013, 10 years ago, so MarcEdit was still fairly new to us, doing it as a project. I know it's fairly common now for people to be using it for things, so just take that into consideration. So it may seem really simple to some other people by now, but for us it was a big deal at the time. So there's a screenshot of part of our collection. It's actually off the floors and onto shelves by this time. I didn't have some of the really old pictures when it really looked like back in the day. But back in 2013, we started with students typing this artist title and record label information and the amount of discs in an Excel spreadsheet, just keeping it simple. And then we were using the MarcEditor to transform the records from Excel to a template in Millennium at the time, and now Sierra, using the data exchange, which if anybody's familiar with that system, that's the common method. And the project was completed in 2013, again, 10 years, okay. So the initial process, it was started by our system staff member, who's still there at Bowling Green still, and working with our head librarian at the time, Susanna Cleveland. They created Excel spreadsheet data that we wanted to fill in and a template in MarcEdit to perform the data exchange in Millennium and the iOS. They did some test records that were created and loaded into Millennium to ensure that the process worked properly, because we don't want to be having it put things in the wrong fields. At the time, we were able to hire one student to work 30 hours in the summer of 2013 to get the project started. And myself at the time, I was a special collections cataloger working in pop culture and music at the time. I was eventually trained on how to verify and prepare the Excel spreadsheets and to load the files from MarcEdit into Millennium. So again, this was, just getting it started, and really our administration really wanted us to do something, because again, we'd been taking in donations for years and years, and they were all just sitting. So they wanted us to start doing something. So again, this is just kind of really basic. You can see that our old Excel spreadsheets, we basically had the artist information. If it was a single artist, it had last name, first name. If it was a group, it was in a different box. The album title, and then the record label name and number, and then how many discs were in the set. And then we had a note about please ask at the service desk if somebody wanted to request these. These are all items, by the way, so our collection is set up. We have our main collection on our 3rd floor of the building, which is all music library, and we have a separate floor, which is all just music stuff, our backlog, and that includes our 45 collection, some 7-inch 33s, and some other paper files, as well as the 100,000 LPs downstairs. So it's working in a different space altogether. So the new Excel spreadsheets that we did, we just wanted to have a little more information for the call numbers. Initially, we just used UNCAT LP to separate it from the catalog materials upstairs. So we were trying to come up with a word for UNCAT so we know it was not fully cataloged. We just changed it a little bit, and you can see on the second slide at the end of it, we've got the UNCAT 12/33 and the name and number attached to it, so it's easier to find it instead of having to go to the 028 information to find the information to retrieve the records. What our plan was once we had these loaded and people started finding them in the catalog, then we could actually go down and retrieve them, catalog them fully, and bring them up to the main collection so they'd get switched over and overlaid with the fully catalog record. And so here you can see the two different things. The old version with the UNCAT LP in the call number area up here in the yellow, and then we switched it to UNCAT 12/33 with the label name and number, which is our system of our call numbers that we're doing. Although we are in the process of switching to just succession numbers as well, but that will be a whole other process. So after the first student was graduated and left us, we had additional steps we had to complete because for a long time we had students that had been shelving in that area with very little training and supervision of them, and so there was a lot of errors of shelving things. And I also realized that once some of the new students, even though they'd been working down there, they didn't actually know a lot. They didn't have to be music majors, number one, but they'd also never really worked with LPs, and so, or most of them anyways, and so they didn't realize what some of the information was on a disc, and so I actually found this great picture. I created documentation to describe the process of searching and also what information to look for on a record. They didn't know that the word long playing is actually not a record label, or stereo is not a record label, or how to pick which label if there's more than one thing listed, like it could be EMI and Parlophone listed on the same thing. How do they pick which one to go? Or is it an acronym or a word, you know, those kind of things. So I tried to have this documentation. I have a whole big document, like 20 pages, that they have to look at for all the searching and all the Excel stuff, as well as what to pick for what information to put in. And other things like, so for example, you know, RCA Victor has a stereo and a mono version, but it's very close. It's LSP and LPM, but the number is exactly the same. And the cover looks exactly the same as and this one for the Ames brothers. So again, if you see the same record and the numbers look exactly the same, but you don't realize it's a stereo and mono version, and we were keeping both, you need to make sure that you have the right information and which one, you know, how to differentiate. Or the same thing like for foreign language, a lot of them I found students putting things under the word discs. That means the word record. That's not what you file it under the record company's MOUG, right? So just things like that, very basic information to most of us who have been working with recordings, but students didn't have a clue, right? Or really didn't know what to do. And then things like just the RCA Victor one where it says SGAE, they didn't know that that was not actually a label. That's actually like the ASCAP equivalent in a different language, right? So things like that, I was trying to highlight and bring them out so that they could see it, and because I couldn't always give them examples when I was training with them. So I had to try and find them ahead of time and make the documentation a little bit better. So the Excel instructions, again, were pretty straightforward. This is just a step-by-step on what they were putting in, and also how to search properly, because once we started loading the records into the system, we were not doing authority work. So you would have the Kinks without musical group and Kinks with musical group in the catalog stuff and the not catalog stuff. So they had to check multiple places, and they still do, to find out if we have something or not, and if it's uncatalogued or in the full catalog collection. We had to tell them, you know, don't use the word the or initial articles in front of when you're searching a name. And then how to put in titles correctly as well. And so the main thing that we also, when they were starting to put records in, is to make sure that the actual record inside the container matches, because a lot of things were donated. We didn't buy a lot of this stuff, so the donations might not have been put together correctly as well. So there was lots of things for them to be on the lookout for, right? And so that's why I was really trying to make the documentation complete and make sure I sat down with each one of them individually and worked with them for examples of how to do things. So again, you can see here all the boxes that we filled in with the artist title, label name, and number. And again, it keeps going on here with what to put in. There were, again, some other anomalies, like if they didn't have matrix numbers or anything on the inner circle at all, or even on the disk, what do they do? And again, if I'm not there for them on the same space where they're working, if they didn't bring it to my attention, I didn't know. So I'm like, we just do 001. We just make up a number, but they didn't know what to put in there. And just things like how to use Excel. Sometimes some of them had never used the Excel spreadsheets, the autofill. If you're doing all one label, but then it changes, you need to make sure that you switch and don't do the drop down and hold it down and save, keep all the information the same. So there was some of that kind of information as well to talk through. And then because I had more than one student typically working on the project, I wanted to have them save their own files either each week or however long it took them to fill up a spreadsheet. And then I would go into that save file. I had them put the dates and then their initials, so I knew who did what collections, what part of the collection, so I could keep track and go back to them and see if they had any errors or things that are happening. I need to go back and fix things with them. And then, of course, if there's any duplicates or any other problem things, they were supposed to bring them to my attention. Or if there's things that were in bad condition, they were supposed to let us know as well. So the overall process, as you can see, we had the students, they got trained with all the documentation and everything. And again, sometimes I had about up to 3 students at a time working maybe, and so I had to give them different sections to work on so they didn't run into each other and overlap and duplicate each other. And also because there were some of the labels, like I said, I've now found that one person put it under one thing and one person put it under another label, and now we have duplicates. And so we're finding that already as we're going back and redoing some things. All the students were given a truck like these trucks on the screen here. They were able to have their own, they had their name on it, they had their own section. These, of course, have 45s on it, but it's the same principle. And so they were working in this space that we call Room 100, and most of them worked about 10 hours a week. And again, they got their own sections, and then they were supposed to be searching for duplication, type in the data, and then reshelve the items after they were done, after on their truck. So the overall process continued. Once the students had about 500 lines or so on a spreadsheet, I tried to keep it a workable amount so I wouldn't have to be fixing thousands of records at one time. They would notify me that the spreadsheet is ready to be loaded. I would move the file from, we had SharePoint that we were using for this, from the files where they were working on. And once they were done with their spreadsheet, then I would move it over to where I would work on it next. And then I would review for all typos and missing data fields and anything else that needed to be worked on. So the overall process we ended up changing by after COVID, because our last student that had been working down there graduated in 2021. So we actually ended up moving the process to our desk students to finish off, because we were so close. We only had one range of shelving yet to go through of records by that point. And so I said, I'm going to have this desk students help me search it, and then I will do the loading of the Excel spreadsheet as myself, and then do the loading of the records as well. So I actually, you can see on this truck here now, this is what I bring up to the students. I bring it from on the first floor, bring it up to them, have them put stuff in order, and have them put a flag in for me so I can make sure it goes back on the shelf in order with having the flag on it, because you can't tell what call numbers are with no labels on them otherwise. So I have the students put a flag, and I also have them initial it. So again, if they're having trouble figuring how to put stuff in order, I can go back and check and make sure that they're all set. And so again, the MarcEdit stuff is pretty straightforward here. Once the file is reviewed and prepared, I save it as a TXT file, move it to my computer for the loading, and then I use the MarcEdit process here, where the text, the limited text translator is what you click on, and then you bring your files in, change it to a .mrk file, and I also had a qualifier of quotation marks, and I fixed the leader information as well in the 008 field, which you'll see in a second here. So there's a couple fields on here we changed. I have the before and the after. I know there was a typo on the after, it's missing a 2. But we were adding the language code English and fixing some of the dashes and slashes and zeros to make it work for our system, for our leader. And you have to have your template set up in the MarcEdit to do this. And again, if you haven't done this before, you can definitely work through it on how you have to set each field to whatever characters, whatever information you're putting in the field. And this is some more of that. You have to put all your arguments in. And then I had the template from my computer loaded on, and that's what I clicked on to bring it in. And then you use the MarcEditor to get the file, and you open it up, and hopefully it looks like what you want it to look like. Brief records with, we were using mainly the 028 field, the call number, the artist title, and I was putting sound recording in just so I could find them really easily, as opposed to other records that we stopped putting the delimiter H in. And then how many discs, and then the note about please ask at the desk, so students would know to come up to our floor and ask for it if they found that actual item. And I would do a spot check and just make sure I would write down a couple titles from the list and make sure that they came out right as well. And then again, you compile it into your MRC file. And then you go to your data exchange, which in our case was Sierra. So you have to go to Get PC, click on the file, and we upload it as an LFTS. And you go to your prep button. Again, this is all step-by-step for Sierra users only, obviously. Make sure that you have the right amount of records that were on your Excel spreadsheet, matching how many records you come with on the data exchange. And then you're going to load your file. And we have it as our location was must for the location downstairs in our room 100. And we load it with that. And we could also use a review file to save it, but I also did it as a PDF file. So I would have all the bib record added and the item records added as a list. And then you just load it. And even though this is a little blurry, that's not your eyesight, it's blurry on the screen here, the PDF file. It just gives the list of bib numbers and the titles that were added in the list that you had. And so once they're loaded, again, I just did a double check on a couple of them to make sure that the records came out right. And then I would upload all the files that I had created, the TXT, the MRC, MRK PDF. I would upload those into SharePoint. So again, I have a track of everything that I created and can go back to files if I need to. And then I also was keeping track of statistics. So I would, everything I was loading, I was just keeping track of how many records I loaded each time I loaded. So the pros. Now, it may seem like there's not as many pros as cons, but it's still a worthwhile project. So it's a good way to add a lot of records in a short period of time, although 10 years is not short to most people, but for us, 100,000 records, that's pretty good. It provides access to materials that would otherwise be hidden for many more years. And actually, it allowed our students to learn a lot more about the recordings, the archives collection itself, and anomalies associated with record labels. All my students also do cataloging at our service desk, so they've actually learned a lot between either CDs, they're doing 45s now, some are doing LPs. So they're learning a lot about the collection, and I explain, this is how long it takes to do one thing, one record. And so it does give them an idea, and then they actually like to show off their skills and tell people about the collection too. So it gives them, an investment into the collection too. The cons, again, a little bit more than you'd hope for, but most of it is just because you're working with students, and they're also unsupervised. Where I was on the 3rd floor, they're on the 1st floor. I can't be interacting with them all the time, even though I did pop down a lot and I tried to check in a lot. But there's 6 or 8 students sometimes working at different times on different things. So, and sometimes they just didn't come to me or didn't leave things for me with them they maybe should have. So it's just the nature of working with students sometimes, which. It's not going to happen any other way. Sometimes I can do it myself. So, there are things with errors for checking data. Some of them, maybe they didn't know if it was a musical group or the title. It's really hard sometimes for popular music albums. Any of us who've done that. It's hard sometimes, and before they could use Discogs, they didn't know about Discogs.com. They might not have found any information about whether it's a group or a person or a title. How to handle publisher information. Like I said, there's multiple publishers. They might not know which one to pick, or if it's an acronym. If it's a 45 RPM, they needed to make sure that they pulled those out. Apparently, some of those got shelved before we were doing the project. Again, just looking for condition. Some things had either water damage or, maybe had gotten moldy or whatever from sitting on the shelf, and so we had to find some of that. And then just errors in searching for duplicates. Again, people might have put it under one label or the other, or just missed it altogether. And again, I needed to keep loading the records as well on a regular basis, so I didn't forget the steps. Even though I had paper documentation, you still just need to do it fairly often, or you can lose it. And my final thoughts: we know exactly how many LPs we have. It's 108,000 with a few, a couple hundred after that. So the backlog is done. We've been able to use this process to do other projects as well. Our 7-inch 45s, we have 211,000 of those we've loaded over the years. Our promo file collection. We're able to go back and review certain labels to see if we need to put them back in order a little bit better because they maybe gotten messed up a little bit. And we're also able to move some of the backlog cataloging queue upstairs to put on the cataloging floor because we can determine, okay, we have this many polka albums, we want to move these upstairs and let's work on those now. And then most places you might not have the support to do this. Our administration knew we needed to do this and wanted us to keep working on it, so we had this support for student help, and obviously I was working on it a lot as well. So for our case, it worked great. Might not be for everybody, but like I said, it was a labor of love, and I'm the last one standing. So the milestone was celebrated in January 24, even though we finished in October of 2023. We just had a cake and celebrated with our students and staff. And like I said, I'm the last person that's been there since we started the project, but it was definitely worthwhile. And now the sun is setting on that project. So if there's any questions, we have a few minutes, I think. I don't know. Okay.
Hi, Patty. First, I'm thrilled to hear about a project that actually got finished because that's
Right?
that's the dream.
Right.
I'm curious what kind of impact you saw of the minimal amount of metadata that you did. Like, did you get a sense that it was helping people find the things?
It did. And actually, so we've been bringing things up on a regular basis, and some things we were using for display purposes, but other things we were actually, when people request them, we're cataloging them. If we can do it ahead of time, we do it ahead of time. We're also part of there's a Popular Culture Research Institute that comes in the summers. They're back doing it now after COVID break time, but we had a lot of researchers using stuff from our collection in Room 100, so if we had advance notice, we could catalog it ahead of time for these researchers coming in. So yeah, it's not as often, but yeah, they are finding it, and like I said, our students are finding the stuff too when they're looking for the duplicates too. So yeah, Mark.
Great presentation. One of the principles behind what you're doing is that you're bringing things forward
Right.
that aren't necessarily that are going to have to stay in that state for a long
Right.
time, perhaps.
Right. Yes.
And we've been doing that for 25 years at WashU, except we were doing it with students inputting MARC records and such. So two questions. One question is, does your system make any use of the 007 field for limiting? And
Yes. Yes,
do
and I
you
put
put
the
those in there?
I did put the 07
I couldn't see
field
them.
in. Yeah, they were cut off on the top part, but yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
you
we
do put
those
007s in. The other
Yeah.
question is, again, since these are going to hang around for a while, do you have any sense of a need to add the kinds of RDA-ish field, like the 3XX fields? Do you have any sense of needing to do that because they're going to have to hang out for a while
Right.
and maybe play with whatever system you end up with?
We haven't gotten that far yet. I think it was because we just finished everything recently. I think we haven't gotten to think about that at all. So there's one more minute left, so maybe they can.
I have short legs.
Hi, I'm Lycan. So as I'm looking at a backlog of about 600,000 sound recordings, I'm wondering if you are seeing a process where maybe minimal records are made and contributed that I can use. Like encoding level 7 type things
Right.
that like people can kind of expand over time as they have time.
Right. I think the main reason we didn't want to put stuff in is because of the authority work, and we didn't want to mess around in OCLC with creating problems with that, because we were putting in, if it was a compilation, they put in the word various artists, so that's not helpful at all to anybody else, right? And then obviously if people with the same name, and how do you differentiate if there's no record for NACO, or even if there is, we don't know which one it is until the students can't find it, right? Or don't know how to look for it. So yeah, we didn't have much of an opportunity to figure that out, but I know that's a situation, but Yeah, it's a huge time-consuming thing, but I don't know. We don't have anything else that we can do with the minimum records right now. So I think that's all our time.